The antenna cable stretches exactly 47 feet from the radio shack to the steel mast, where Eddie Kowalski climbs through November sleet that turns every metal surface into a skating rink, where North Atlantic weather demonstrates its capacity for making simple technical tasks into life-threatening exercises in survival, where radio equipment maintenance requires courage that electronics school never mentioned when instructors described theoretical aspects of electromagnetic wave propagation without addressing practical realities, of antenna adjustment under combat conditions that challenge every assumption about optimal installation procedures and maintenance protocols. Below him, the convoy spreads across gray waters in defensive formation that has evolved through bitter experience with German submarine tactics, through mathematical calculations about optimal spacing between merchant vessels, through tragic lessons learned. When convoy commanders positioned ships according to peacetime navigation principles rather than wartime survival requirements that prioritize mutual protection over efficient transportation, that accept reduced cargo capacity as necessary cost of maintaining Atlantic supply routes despite German submarine warfare designed to sever logistical connections between American production and European military consumption. Radio Technician First Class Edward Eddie Kowalski understands radio frequency propagation the way musicians understand harmony, the way painters understand color relationships, the way farmers understand soil chemistry and weather patterns that determine agricultural success through variables that textbooks describe but experience teaches through trial and error, through success and disaster, through innovations born from necessity, when standard procedures prove inadequate for circumstances that exceed design parameters and require creative solutions that violate established protocols in service of essential objectives. His technical education began in Depression-era Chicago, where amateur radio operators developed innovative techniques for long-distance communication using surplus equipment and improvised components, where radio experimentation thrived through economic necessity rather than corporate research budgets, where electronics enthusiasts learned electromagnetic theory through practical application rather than classroom instruction, creating community of technical knowledge that emphasized results over theoretical understanding, practical solutions over academic explanations that often failed to address real-world problems encountered in actual radio operations. The Navy recruited Kowalski based on amateur radio experience that demonstrated unusual understanding of antenna design, frequency management, signal propagation, characteristics that formal education rarely addressed through theoretical instruction designed for standard operating conditions, rather than the complex electromagnetic environment that military communications face during wartime operations when atmospheric conditions, equipment limitations, and enemy interference combine to challenge every assumption about optimal radio system performance and reliability under adverse conditions. But military advancement also subjected his technical innovations to regulatory oversight that prioritized procedural compliance over practical results, standardization over customization, adherence to established protocols over creative problem-solving that could enhance communication effectiveness, through unauthorized modifications that improved signal quality while violating official specifications, designed for standard installations, rather than the specialized requirements that combat communications often demand through environmental factors and operational conditions that peacetime testing never anticipated or addressed. This is November 1943. The Battle of the Atlantic reaches critical phase where German Wolfpack tactics threaten Allied convoy operations through coordinated submarine attacks that overwhelm escort defenses, where U-boat communication networks enable tactical coordination that multiplies individual submarine effectiveness through group operations that concentrate attack power against vulnerable merchant shipping, where German submarine commanders share target information, coordinate approach vectors, synchronize attacks that maximize damage while minimizing exposure to Allied anti-submarine capabilities that have evolved to counter individual submarine operations, but struggle against coordinated Wolfpack tactics. Convoy HX-217 carries critical supplies including aircraft engines, ammunition, medical supplies, food rations that sustain British resistance while supporting Soviet military operations. While building American force levels for continental invasion that German strategy must prevent through disruption of Atlantic logistics operations that enable Allied military buildup, that maintain British survival, that support Soviet resistance against German forces whose success depends on preventing Allied coordination through submarine warfare, that severs communication links between democratic allies whose cooperation determines outcome of global conflict. German submarine group Raubgraf consists of 14 U-boats positioned across convoy routes under central coordination that enables Wolfpack attacks through radio communication networks that share target information, coordinate approach tactics, synchronize strike timing that overwhelms escort capabilities through concentrated submarine assault, that individual vessels cannot survive despite improved Allied anti-submarine weapons, detection equipment, tactical procedures that prove effective against single submarine attacks, but cannot cope with coordinated group operations. The German naval strategy has developed through operational experience and tactical innovation. Kowalski monitors Allied radio traffic from the merchant vessel SS City of Hartford. Positioned in Convoy Center, where communication responsibilities include maintaining contact with escort commanders, merchant vessel captains, shore-based coordination centers that manage convoy routing, weather reporting, intelligence distribution about German submarine activities that threaten specific convoy operations through tactical information that enables defensive preparations, route modifications, escort reinforcement that could enable convoy survival despite Wolfpack attacks that have destroyed numerous Allied convoys through coordinated submarine operations. His radio equipment includes standard Navy communications gear, supplemented by modifications that enhance signal clarity, extend transmission range, improve reception quality through antenna adjustments that violate installation specifications, but provide performance improvements that serve communication requirements under adverse conditions where atmospheric interference, equipment limitations, electromagnetic noise from other vessels create operating environment that's standard installations cannot handle adequately through approved procedures designed for optimal conditions rather than the challenging electromagnetic environment that wartime communications routinely encounter. The antenna modification that changes everything emerges not from careful planning or theoretical analysis, but from practical observation of signal quality, variations that suggest correlation between antenna, position, and reception characteristics, between environmental factors and communication effectiveness, between minor equipment adjustments and major performance, improvements that standard installation procedures do not address through regulatory frameworks designed for standardized operations rather than customized solutions that specific operating conditions might require for optimal communication capability under adverse circumstances. German submarine commanders depend on radio coordination for Wolfpack effectiveness that enables tactical advantages through information sharing, coordinated positioning, synchronized attacks that concentrate submarine firepower against convoy defenses that cannot respond effectively to simultaneous assault from multiple directions, through multiple attack vectors at coordinated timing that overwhelms escort capabilities despite superior Allied anti-submarine weapons and detection equipment that prove effective against individual submarine operations, but cannot cope with coordinated group tactics. The radio frequencies that enable German coordination operate within electromagnetic spectrum that Allied monitoring stations track continuously through direction-finding equipment, signal analysis, traffic pattern recognition that provides intelligence about German submarine operations while serving as potential target for Allied interference through jamming operations, frequency disruption, communication degradation that could compromise German tactical coordination while maintaining Allied communication effectiveness through frequency management and equipment modifications that serve Allied objectives. Kowalski's antenna adjustment occurs during routine maintenance that addresses signal quality problems affecting convoy communication, reception difficulties that impair coordination between merchant vessels and escort commanders, transmission issues that reduce communication effectiveness during tactical operations when reliable radio contact determines convoy survival through coordinated defensive maneuvers, escort positioning, emergency procedures that require immediate communication between all convoy elements during submarine attacks that threaten individual vessel survival and overall convoy integrity. The antenna movement measures exactly 36 inches in horizontal direction, repositioning the receiving element to location that improves signal reception through electromagnetic principles that Kowalski understands intuitively rather than theoretically, through practical experience with radio frequency behavior rather than academic knowledge of antenna theory, through operational observation of performance variations that suggest optimal positioning for specific frequency ranges and atmospheric conditions that affect electromagnetic wave propagation in ways that textbook instruction never addressed adequately. The immediate effect appears in improved reception quality for Allied communications that operate on frequencies adjacent to German submarine networks, creating electromagnetic interaction that enhances Allied signal clarity while generating interference. Patterns that disrupt German radio coordination through unintentional jamming effects that result from antenna positioning that creates constructive interference for Allied frequencies while producing destructive interference for German communication channels through electromagnetic phenomena that military communications training rarely addressed in sufficient detail. 800 miles away, German submarine commanders lose radio contact with Wolfpack coordination networks that enable tactical communication between individual U-boats, that provide target information sharing, that coordinate attack positioning and timing for maximum effectiveness against convoy defenses, creating communication breakdown that eliminates German tactical advantages through technological malfunction that submarine crews cannot diagnose or repair through standard communication, procedures that prove ineffective when radio equipment functions normally but electromagnetic environment prevents signal transmission and reception. The communication failure manifests gradually rather than immediately, creating confusion among German submarine commanders who attempt troubleshooting procedures that address equipment problems rather than external interference, who assume mechanical failure rather than Allied jamming operations, who implement backup communication procedures that prove equally ineffective because antenna positioning continues generating electromagnetic interference that disrupts German frequency allocations while maintaining Allied communication effectiveness through frequency separation and signal characteristics that remain unaffected by interference patterns. U-432's commander, Kapitän Leutnant Wolfgang Schmidt, attempts emergency communication procedures that include frequency changes, transmission power increases, antenna adjustments that fail to restore contact with other Wolfpack elements, creating tactical isolation that eliminates coordination capabilities essential for Wolfpack effectiveness, forcing individual submarine operations that sacrifice group tactical advantages while exposing U-boats to Allied anti-submarine capabilities designed to counter individual threats, rather than coordinated group attacks that German strategy depends upon for Atlantic warfare success. The tactical breakdown spreads throughout the Wolfpack as individual submarine commanders lose coordination capability, abandon synchronized attack plans, resort to independent operations that eliminate concentration advantages while exposing submarines to escort counterattacks that prove devastatingly effective against isolated U-boats operating without mutual support, without coordinated positioning, without tactical information sharing that enables Wolfpack survival through group defensive measures and coordinated withdrawal procedures when Allied anti-submarine forces locate German submarine positions. Convoy HX-217 proceeds through waters where 14 German submarines have lost tactical coordination, where Wolfpack attack plans dissolve into individual submarine operations that Allied escort. Forces can counter effectively through anti-submarine capabilities that prove adequate against single threats, but cannot cope with coordinated group assault, enabling convoy survival through electromagnetic interference that eliminates German tactical advantages without Allied commanders, understanding the technical factors that have neutralized submarine coordination and enabled successful transit through waters where previous convoys have suffered catastrophic losses. The investigation into communication failure begins when German naval headquarters loses contact with entire Wolfpack operations. When submarine commanders report equipment malfunctions that standard troubleshooting cannot resolve, when tactical coordination networks experience systematic failure that suggests Allied jamming operations rather than equipment problems, requiring technical analysis of communication disruption that might indicate Allied development of electromagnetic warfare capabilities that could compromise German submarine effectiveness throughout Atlantic operations. German radio technicians analyze frequency interference patterns that suggest external jamming rather than equipment failure. Electromagnetic disruption that affects specific frequency ranges used for submarine coordination while leaving other communication channels unaffected, indicating sophisticated Allied understanding of German radio procedures and technical capabilities that enables selective jamming operations designed to disrupt submarine coordination without affecting German communication networks that serve other military purposes and strategic requirements. The technical analysis reveals that interference patterns originate from specific geographic locations that correspond to Allied convoy routes, suggesting that jamming operations emanate from convoy vessels rather than shore-based installations, indicating Allied development of shipboard electromagnetic warfare capabilities that can disrupt German submarine coordination through mobile jamming, platforms that accompany convoys and provide communication protection through selective frequency interference that maintains Allied radio effectiveness while degrading German tactical coordination capabilities. Meanwhile, Kowalski observes improved Allied communication quality that results from his antenna adjustment, noting signal strength improvements that enhance convoy coordination, reception clarity that improves navigation accuracy, transmission effectiveness that enables better tactical communication between escort, vessels and merchant ships during anti-submarine operations that benefit from reliable radio contact for coordinated defensive maneuvers and emergency procedures that require immediate communication between all convoy elements during submarine attacks. The correlation between antenna positioning and communication improvement suggests electromagnetic principles that could be applied systematically to enhance Allied radio effectiveness while potentially disrupting German communication networks through intentional interference operations that exploit German frequency allocations and technical procedures, indicating possibilities for electromagnetic warfare that extends beyond traditional radio jamming to include precision interference that targets specific enemy communication requirements while maintaining Allied radio capabilities. Allied radio intelligence officers noticed German communication pattern changes that suggest systematic disruption of submarine coordination networks, indicating possible breakthrough in electromagnetic warfare that could provide strategic advantages in Atlantic convoy operations through degradation of German Wolfpack effectiveness, through elimination of tactical coordination that enables submarine group operations, through technical methods that achieve strategic objectives without requiring direct military engagement or additional anti-submarine resources that strain Allied naval capabilities. The investigation into German communication failure leads to recognition that Allied convoy routes produce electromagnetic interference patterns that disrupt submarine coordination, that specific antenna configurations can generate selective jamming effects, that mobile electromagnetic warfare capabilities offer strategic advantages that could revolutionize Atlantic convoy protection through technical methods rather than military solutions that require additional escort vessels, anti-submarine aircraft, naval resources that Allied forces cannot provide in sufficient quantities to counter German submarine operations. Captain James Morrison, the convoy commodore, receives reports of unusual German submarine behavior that suggests communication problems among Wolfpack elements, tactical confusion that eliminates coordinated attack capabilities, individual submarine operations that Allied escort forces can counter effectively through conventional anti-submarine procedures, indicating possible Allied technical advantage that neutralizes German tactical superiority through electromagnetic interference rather than superior naval capabilities or increased escort strength. The strategic implications extend beyond immediate convoy protection to encompass broader possibilities for electromagnetic warfare that could compromise German military coordination throughout Atlantic operations, that could provide Allied technological advantages through radio frequency management and interference operations, that could achieve strategic objectives through technical innovation rather than military expansion, that requires resources Allied forces cannot allocate without compromising other essential operations in Pacific, Mediterranean, European theaters. Kowalski's antenna adjustment becomes foundation for systematic development of shipboard jamming capabilities that enhance convoy protection through electromagnetic interference operations, that disrupt German submarine coordination through selective frequency jamming, that provide mobile electromagnetic warfare platforms that accompany convoys and protect Allied shipping through technical methods rather than additional military escort that requires naval resources unavailable for convoy protection due to competing strategic requirements in global warfare. The technical principles that enable selective jamming through antenna positioning become basis for Allied electromagnetic warfare development that extends beyond submarine communication to encompass broader German military radio networks, coordination systems, tactical communication that enables combined operations, strategic planning, operational effectiveness that depends on reliable radio communication between military units whose coordination determines combat effectiveness and strategic success in global conflict. Post-war analysis reveals that Kowalski's antenna modification contributed to systematic degradation of German submarine effectiveness through communication, disruption that eliminated Wolfpack tactical advantages, that forced individual submarine operations that Allied anti-submarine capabilities could counter effectively, that reduced German Atlantic warfare effectiveness through technical innovation, rather than military solutions that would have required additional resources and naval capabilities that Allied forces could not provide without compromising operations in other theaters. The electromagnetic warfare principles developed from antenna positioning techniques become foundation for modern electronic warfare that recognizes radio frequency management as essential military capability, that integrates communication protection with offensive jamming operations, that demonstrates how technical innovation can achieve strategic objectives through electromagnetic spectrum control rather than traditional military capabilities, that require extensive resources and personnel that may not be available for specific operational requirements. Kowalski returns to civilian electronics employment with enhanced understanding of electromagnetic principles that apply to commercial radio development. Antenna design, frequency management that serves civilian communication. Requirements while incorporating lessons learned through military application of radio technology under adverse conditions that challenge standard engineering assumptions about optimal system design and operational effectiveness under real-world conditions that differ significantly from laboratory testing environments. His wartime experience influences post-war electronics industry development through consulting work that applies military lessons to civilian communication challenges, that demonstrates electromagnetic principles applicable to commercial radio systems, that establishes precedent for technical innovation that serves practical, Objectives through creative application of established principles rather than revolutionary technological development that requires extensive research and development resources. The antenna adjustment that jammed German Wolfpack coordination becomes symbol of technical innovation serving strategic objectives. Practical expertise identifying solutions that theoretical knowledge overlooks. Individual technical competence contributing to collective military success. Through unauthorized modifications that violate established procedures in service of essential objectives that regulations were intended to support, rather than prevent through bureaucratic inflexibility that prioritizes compliance over effectiveness. Years later, when military historians analyze factors contributing to Allied victory in Atlantic warfare, they cite electromagnetic interference operations among technological developments that neutralize German tactical advantages, demonstrating that technical innovation can achieve strategic consequences when practical expertise identifies solutions that formal military planning overlooks through excessive reliance on conventional approaches rather than creative application of existing capabilities to new operational requirements. If stories like this remind you that small technical adjustments can have massive strategic consequences, that practical expertise often exceeds theoretical knowledge in solving real-world problems, then perhaps there are other moments of technical innovation serving military objectives worth remembering, worth celebrating, worth carrying forward into whatever challenges require us to choose between conventional approaches and creative solutions that achieve essential objectives through unconventional application of existing capabilities.